Imagine waking up tomorrow, and the world you know has disappeared, and no signal, no help, just ocean. You are surrounded by thousands of miles of the most dangerous sea on the planet, and there is no quick or easy way out. This is real life on the most isolated and extreme islands on Earth. Places where money is worthless, where everyone shares the same last name, and others where freedom is so extreme that jealousy simply does not exist. Today on Uncensored World, you're going to visit islands where everyone is descended from the same man, where dying is forbidden, where some had to hide to survive, and one last island, so dangerous that it's forbidden to approach. Let's get started. Pitcairn Islands, United Kingdom, the island where they tried to disappear from the world. In the year 1789, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a group of British sailors decided to challenge the most powerful empire in the world. Aboard the HMS Bounty, they betrayed their captain, William Bligh. It was not a simple act of rebellion. It was a direct challenge to the British Empire, a sentence with no return that condemned them to disappear from the map. After taking control of the ship, the mutineers knew they would be pursued. The British Empire did not forgive treason. That is why they needed to disappear. They needed to find a place so remote that no map clearly marked it, so isolated that no ship would find it by chance. And they found it. It was called Pitcairn, a small volcanic island lost in the vast South Pacific, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited land, more than 1,200 miles, and thousands of miles from any shipping lane. A rugged territory covered with dense vegetation, surrounded by sharp cliffs and treacherous reefs that made landing almost impossible. A place difficult to reach, and even more difficult to leave. A perfect refuge to disappear from the world, or a natural trap from which they could never escape. When they arrived, they made a decision that would seal their fate. They burned the ship. The flames of the Bounty lit up the night as their only means of escape disappeared in the fire and smoke. They didn't want to leave any traces. They didn't want to be able to return. That island would be their voluntary prison, but they didn't arrive alone, and that would change everything. The mutineers were accompanied by Polynesian men and women who had embarked in Tahiti. It was the women who made survival possible. With them, the first families began. With them, a community isolated from the world was born. But the real problem was not the British Empire. It was what happened when there was no one left to watch over them. The early years were not peaceful. There were tensions, violence, and internal conflicts. Some died in clashes. Others succumbed to isolation, disputes over power, and women. Of that initial group, only a few European men survived, along with the Polynesian women and their children. For a time, the greatest danger was not the ocean. It was themselves. From that initial chaos, a new generation emerged. Today, more than 2 centuries later, around 50 people live on Pitcairn. Most are direct descendants of those mutineers and the Tahitian women who arrived with them. That is why surnames are repeated and family histories are intertwined. In such a small community, everyone is connected in some way. Although they are not as connected as on another island you will learn about later, where everyone is descended from the same man. For decades, this island survived on fishing, small-scale farming, and sporadic trade with ships that passed by irregularly. There is no airport, and the only way to get there is by boat, after days of sailing on the open sea. Communications are limited. Resources are scarce. The nearest hospital is thousands of miles away. Centuries later, they seem to live as they did in the beginning. Today, Pitcairn is one of the most isolated British overseas territories on the planet. A place where only a few dozen people survive on a land born of fire and crime. An island that began as a hideout and ended up becoming a prolonged human experiment. If your only option for survival was to disappear from the world, from your family and your past, would you do it? Surely few could. History dictated that sooner or later the mutineers would be found. They had crossed half the world to disappear, and yet the world ended up catching up with them. Perhaps their only mistake was not going far enough, not to a hidden island, but to the most remote one of all. Tristan Da Cunha, United Kingdom, the most remote island in the world. In the heart of the South Atlantic Ocean, there is a tiny dot on the map that looks like a geographical error. A place so isolated that for centuries it was closer to silence than to civilization. That place is Tristan Da Cunha. It is not far from a city, it is not far from a country, it is far from everything. More than 1,500 miles from the nearest human settlement, this island has no neighbors, no trade routes, and no second chances. Only sea. Thousands of miles of cold, unpredictable, and often deadly ocean. A corner of the planet that seemed destined to remain uninhabited forever. And yet, for more than 2 centuries, a small group of people decided to stay. Living here is not an adventure. It is a constant challenge to nature. Getting to Tristan Da Cunha is not easy. There is no airport. There are no commercial flights or direct connections. The only way to reach it is after several days of sailing from South Africa, crossing violent and stormy waters that constantly remind you that this place was not meant for human beings. And yet there are those who call it home, although not many dare to. Less than 300 people live on this island, inhabitants who, as could not be otherwise, form an extremely close-knit and self-sufficient community. In Tristan Da Cunha, life is far removed from the hustle and bustle and modern comforts, with human connection and wild nature setting the pace of each day. The inhabitants of Tristan Da Cunha maintain traditions that have been passed down for generations, forming a unique culture that has much to do with this solitude and living in such a challenging environment. For all these reasons, almost everyone on this island shares the same surname. Couples are often cousins in order to preserve the small community, a practice that has led to a particular genetic makeup and the emergence of hereditary diseases that are rare in other parts of the world. There are no banks or ATMs on this island. Money matters little when everyone knows each other by their first and last names. Many things work on the basis of trust, exchange, and the given word. In a place where only a few hundred people live, betraying that trust would be almost like condemning oneself to isolation within isolation. There is only one school on the island where children study until high school. To continue their higher education, they must temporarily leave Tristan Da Cunha and face a reality completely different from the one they left behind. But the most disconcerting thing is not that they live there. It is that when they leave, they come back. Many young people leave for the United Kingdom or South Africa. They discover endless highways, hospitals with all kinds of technology, giant supermarkets open day and night, airports with constant flights to anywhere in the world. They discover comfort, speed, endless options, and yet most of them return. Perhaps because in Tristan Da Cunha there are no traffic jams. But there is also no anonymity. There is no luxury, but there is also no loneliness. Even though there is no airport on this island, there is no alternative, only a boat. And it leaves only a few times a year. If a storm prevents the boat from arriving, it simply does not arrive. If there is a serious medical emergency, there is no immediate evacuation. It can take days, or it may not be possible. Here, the sea decides, and as if isolation were not enough, the land itself decided to remind them who is in charge. The island sits on top of an active volcano, a volcano that erupted in 1960 and caused the entire population to be evacuated to the United Kingdom. They lost everything: homes, land, security. But even so, they returned. They voluntarily returned to the island that almost destroyed them, as if there were something about this place that the rest of the world cannot offer. Something that cannot be explained. It can only be felt. And that is perhaps the most disturbing thing about Tristan Da Cunha. Would you dare to travel here, knowing that the next boat may take months to arrive? As you have seen in Tristan Da Cunha, isolation can mean being trapped forever between the sea and an active volcano. But if you can be trapped in Tristan Da Cunha, there is another island on this list where the problem is not escaping, but something much stranger. A remote frozen place full of polar bears and located very close to the North Pole. where extreme conditions have led to an unusual rule. A place where dying is literally forbidden. Longyearbyen, Norway. The island where it is forbidden to die and give birth. In Longyearbyen, road signs do not warn of dangerous curves. They warn of polar bears. Because here the danger does not come from the road, it comes from the ice. Longyearbyen is the largest town on the island of Spitsbergen, in the Svalbard archipelago, in the Norwegian Arctic. One of the northernmost and coldest inhabited places on the planet. Extreme weather conditions and total darkness during the winter months, along with constant light in summer, make Longyearbyen a fascinating and challenging place to live. A striking curiosity about this island is that, instead of the typical warning signs for cows or other animals, the warning signs feature drawings of polar bears. In this region, these enormous and dangerous predators often come down to inhabited areas, forcing the population to be constantly alert and prepared for their presence. In fact, polar bears are so common in the area that the authorities recommend carrying weapons for protection in case of an encounter. In addition, this island is home to the famous global seed vault, known as the Vault at the End of the World. This underground shelter protects millions of crop seeds from around the planet, ensuring the preservation of biodiversity in the face of possible natural disasters or conflicts, a key point for the conservation and future survival of humanity. But the most peculiar thing about this island is possibly that it is forbidden to die there. You may wonder what the crazy reason for this could be, but as you will see, it all makes much more sense than it might seem. It is all due to permafrost. This freezing occurs in cold regions of the world, where soil temperatures remain below the freezing point of water for most of the year, even in summer. The ground here is frozen all year round, and when something is buried, it does not decompose. This poses a public health risk if these deceased bodies are not properly treated. That is why both seriously ill people and those who are close to death have to be evacuated and taken to the mainland for medical care. Another surprising reality is that you cannot give birth on this island either. There are no hospitals equipped for this. Therefore, when the time comes, pregnant women must leave the island weeks in advance and travel to the mainland. In Longyearbyen, you can work, get married, build a life, but you cannot be born. This region is so extraordinary that it is not mandatory to wear a helmet here. But outside the urban center, it is mandatory to carry a rifle, because polar bears outnumber the inhabitants. And when one appears, it does not run away. It does not back down. It does not fear humans. Here, humans are not the predators. Longyearbyen is a living testament to the human capacity to adapt, survive, and thrive in one of the most extreme corners of the planet. An adaptation, like that of its genetics, that has a lot to do with the next island on the list. A place where, because of its own history and a natural cataclysm that almost wiped out all life, most of its population sees everything in black and white. Pingelab, Micronesia, the island where they see in black and white. In the heart of the vast Pacific Ocean, hidden among an endless sea of mysteries and legends, lies Pingelab, an island where reality defies all logic, as most of its inhabitants see the world without colors. Or rather, they see it completely in black and white. The island of Pingelab is known in scientific circles as the place where the most people suffer from an extreme form of color blindness called achromatopsia, a rare genetic disorder that prevents them from distinguishing colors. That is why many know it as the Island of the Colorblind. If you are ever lucky enough to visit Pingelab or any of the other islands of Micronesia, you will surely be amazed by its natural beauty, its lush landscapes, turquoise waters, and extraordinary marine life. A beauty that makes this reality even more striking, because despite living in an environment full of intense colors, more than 10% of the inhabitants of this island perceive life only in black and white. Worldwide, this rare disease affects approximately 3 out of every 100,000 people. In Pingelab, however, the figure is completely different. between 10 and 30% of the population is affected. In other words, between 10 and 30 people out of every 100 see the world without colors. And as is almost always the case in life, mysteries are there to be solved, and there is usually a reason for these surprising facts. According to our research, to understand the reality of this unique island, we must travel back in time to the year 1775. But this story does not begin with genetics. It begins with a catastrophe. That year, a devastating typhoon called Longyearbyen completely destroyed Pingelab. When the wind died down and the sea receded, only 20 survivors remained. Among them was the island's leader, nonexistent, who, according to subsequent studies, suffered from achromatopsia. With the island practically extinct, the priority was to repopulate it. The leader had numerous descendants, and over the generations, his genetic burden spread throughout the community. Today, it is believed that most of those currently affected share a common ancestor, that one survivor. For several generations, nothing visible happened, but in the fourth generation, the first cases began to appear. In the sixth, the number increased significantly, and since then the condition has continued to be passed down to the present day. This forced isolation and closed genetic chain made Pingelab a unique case in the world. Today, the island is the subject of study for geneticists trying to understand how a single event could alter the vision of an entire community. If you are watching this video in color and you like it, take a second. Leave a like right now and help us continue telling stories that the world has almost forgotten. Surely it seemed impossible to you that there could be a place where part of the population sees the world without colors. But if this has surprised you, wait until you see what's next. Because now we're traveling to an island that many describe as something that shouldn't exist on Earth. They call it the Alien Island, Socotra, Yemen, the strangest island on the planet. There is a place on Earth where trees look like giant umbrellas that bleed, where more than a third of the species do not exist anywhere else on the planet. A territory so strange that in 2008, it was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. A place that doesn't seem real. The strangeness of this island is no exaggeration. Its flora, fauna, and landscapes seem to be taken from a fantasy film or another planet. That's why many call it the Alien Island. Because what grows here doesn't grow anywhere else on Earth. It is more than 200 miles from Yemen, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. For centuries, it was almost inaccessible. Between June and September, monsoons turned its coasts into a wall of wind and waves. For months, it was simply impossible to enter. The sea did not protect the island. It isolated it from the world. Socotra is not only strange, it is one of the most remote inhabited places in the world. Until 1999, it could only be reached by sea. In July of that year, its first airport was inaugurated. Most of the inhabitants lived for generations without electricity, running water, or paved roads. Here, the 21st century arrived late. Among the wonders of Socotra is the Dracæna cinnamomum, known as the dragon's blood tree, whose peculiar shape resembles an umbrella and is emblematic of the island. If its bark is wounded, it appears to bleed because its sap is red, thick, and dark. According to local tradition, it was born from the struggle between an elephant and a dragon, and from the blood spilled in that battle. For centuries, its resin was used as medicine, dye, and protection. On an island without modern hospitals, nature was the pharmacy. Socotra is home to more than 800 species of plants. More than a third of them exist nowhere else on the planet. Cucumber trees, impossible cliffs, formations that look like science fiction sets. For centuries, without hospitals or doctors, the Socotrians depended solely on what the island offered. Knowledge of plants and resins was passed down from generation to generation. Socotra became a natural pharmacy in the middle of the ocean. In Socotra, women still dress in colorful clothes and participate in poetic evenings by the fire, where stories are told in an ancient language related to that of the Queen of Sheba. It is usually the mysterious legends like those of their mountains that the people of this remote island like best. The mountains not only dominate the landscape, according to tradition, they also hold invisible presences. Ancient beings that inhabit places where almost no one dares to enter. Perhaps that is why many believe that Socotra was the island that inspired the legends of Sinbad the Sailor. A legend trapped in a real place. A place where nature dominates every horizon. But even here, human life is scarce. And if you think this is isolation, wait until you hear about the next island. There, they are not only far away, they are bound by the same blood. A small island lost in the middle of the Pacific where almost everyone shares the same surname, where everyone is family. Palmerston, Cook Islands. The island where everyone is descended from the same man. Lost in the vast South Pacific Ocean, more than 500 kilometers from the nearest inhabited island, and thousands of miles from any continent, there is a small islet with a truly incredible history. It is just a small ring of coral that timidly emerges from the water, a narrow strip of land surrounded by an endless and often lethal ocean. A place that does not seem designed for life, let alone human life. With no mountains to protect it, no rivers to feed it, and no great natural resources, this islet seems more like a geographical accident than a destination. And yet, history had something very different in store for this forgotten corner of the world. It all began in the 19th century, when a man decided to stay where no one else wanted to. It was in the year 1863, when an English carpenter named William Marsters arrived on this remote atoll, accompanied by 3 Polynesian women. He was not a famous explorer or a conqueror sent by a European crown. He was an ordinary man who saw in that absolute isolation an opportunity to start from scratch. Long before his arrival, that ring of coral had already been christened by European sailors. However, for decades, that name was nothing more than ink on paper, an almost invisible reference in the midst of the blue immensity. No one imagined that that lost spot in the ocean would end up becoming the setting for one of the most unusual family stories in human history. When Marsters arrived, the name already existed, but life did not. Marsters settled on this lifeless island, cultivated the coral soil, planted coconut trees, built simple dwellings, and organized his small territory as if it were a tiny kingdom in the middle of the ocean. Over the years, he had children with each of the 3 women. Those children grew up, formed their own families, and thus began a chain of descendants that would never be broken. Today, more than a century and a half later, almost all of Palmerston's inhabitants are direct descendants of that one man. The current population is only a few dozen people, organized into 3 large family branches that bear the surnames inherited from that founder. There are no strangers on this island. Every child born here is already part of a well-known genealogical network. Every adult knows exactly how they are related to everyone else. Because of all this, the isolation here is not only geographical, it is above all human. Growing up in Palmerston means living surrounded by cousins, distant uncles, nephews, and relatives of varying degrees. It means that any conflict is not a simple neighborhood disagreement, but a family matter that can extend for generations. There is no anonymity. You cannot get lost in the crowd, because there is no crowd, only family. For decades, the community had to carefully manage marriages to avoid problems arising from inbreeding. Many young people left the island for New Zealand or other Pacific islands to find partners outside their small family circle, and then return, thus maintaining a delicate balance between tradition and genetic survival. The blood that binds them also forced them to leave in order to survive. If stories like this surprise you, subscribe now to Uncensored World, because what comes next is even more extreme, and nowhere else will you find realities like these. Getting to Palmerston is not easy. There is no airport, no regular commercial routes, and no tourist cruises that dock every week. Only ships appear sporadically after sailing hundreds of miles of open sea. That is why for weeks, sometimes months, the island can remain completely isolated from the rest of the world. There are no banks, no large supermarkets, and no nearby hospitals. The nearest medical center is hundreds of miles away, and any emergency depends on the state of the sea and the capacity for evacuation. In such a remote location, the economy revolves around fishing, coconut farming, and administrative support from the Cook Islands, the territory to which it belongs politically. But the real backbone of Palmerston is not money, but cooperation forced by isolation. Here, helping each other is not a matter of morality. It is the only option for survival. Isolated by thousands of miles of ocean, united by a single bloodline that began in 1863, the inhabitants of Palmerston are part of one of the most extreme human experiments on the planet. A place where geography enclosed a family, and that family ended up becoming an entire community. A community like Palmerston needs clear rules to survive. In a place where everyone is family, where every decision affects the entire island, intimate life is not a game. It is balance, it is calculation, it is continuity. But there are other corners of the planet where history took a completely different path. Places where isolation did not trap a single family, but allowed social norms to evolve without the constant pressure of the outside world. A place where, at least from our Western perspective, intimately, almost anything seems to be allowed. Trobriand, Papua New Guinea, the islands where everything is allowed. In the southeast of Papua New Guinea, scattered across the Pacific Ocean, lie the Trobriand Islands, a remote archipelago surrounded by intense waters and dense jungles, which for centuries was not easy to reach, nor to stay in. These are not tourist islands or transit hubs. They are territories where life has followed its own rhythm for generations, far from the control of great powers, and above all, far from the morals imposed by the Western world. Their geographical isolation was decisive. For a long time, getting there meant sailing for days or weeks across unpredictable seas. That distance allowed their customs to evolve almost intact, and that is reflected especially in their way of understanding love and desire. In the Trobriand Islands, intimate life is not a taboo. It is a natural part of social growth. Relationships before marriage are not hidden or condemned. Young people can interact freely, choose partners, change them, experiment. Jealousy is not at the center of the system. Here, the bond is not based on possession, but on consent and community acceptance. From the outside, many have called them the islands of free love. But this is not about unlimited debauchery. It is about different norms. Intimate life is not something forbidden or dirty for them. It is part of the social balance. Life is not lived from a place of guilt, but from a place of naturalness. In this society, women also occupy a central position. They are the ones who sustain almost everything. It is not a disorderly community, but a community with its own rules, where power does not revolve exclusively around the authority of traditional men. Among them, there are rituals and festivities, where courtship is visible and public. Seduction is not hidden either. It is part of the way alliances are created between clans and bonds are strengthened. What in many countries would be cause for scandal, here is everyday and totally normal. And perhaps that is the most disturbing thing, that what is considered unthinkable at one end of the planet is as normal as sunrise in another place, lost between the ocean and the jungle. From our perspective, it may seem radical, but for them, it's just life. At this point, the question is inevitable. Do you think these rules would work in your country, or would you like them to? Where are you watching us from? We'll read your comments. Because what comes next has nothing to do with social norms, nor with freedom, nor with desire. It has to do with pure survival. Because while in one corner of the planet love is lived without guilt, in another, there are people who must hide to avoid persecution. What comes next is one of the harshest and most extreme realities in recent human history. A place where isolation is not freedom, it is refuge, and where hiding may be the only way to continue living. Ukerewe, Tanzania, the secret island where African albinos hide. Hidden inside one of the largest lakes on the planet lies a secret island, a place where people arrived, persecuted not for what they did, but for how they were born. On this secret island in the heart of Lake Victoria in Tanzania, the second largest freshwater lake in the world, African albinos have found a refuge that has been denied to them in many other parts of Africa. For generations, desperate families abandoned their albino children on this island to save them from a terrifying fate. Instead of protection and respect, albinism in many African cultures has been synonymous with curse, extreme superstition, or omen. Ukerewe, without intending to, became an involuntary hiding place for the most vulnerable. In addition to facing the sun without the natural protection of melanin, in some regions they have been victims of attacks motivated by superstitions that attribute magical powers to parts of their bodies. This extreme reality has been denounced by many international organizations, as there are illegal markets that feed these beliefs. A reality that, although it seems distant in time, continues to occur. This is how Ukerewe began to be seen as a safe place. What was initially a forced destination for some ended up becoming a community where these people could grow up with greater peace of mind, accompanied and protected. Although social exclusion did not disappear entirely, some things began to change in Ukerewe. Schools began to adapt materials for visual impairments and also changed the way they talked about them. Because transforming education and language was the first step in transforming mindsets. Ukerewe is also a privileged natural environment. The largest island in Lake Victoria, surrounded by birds and landscapes that contrast with the harshness of its recent history. A place where the calm of the landscape seems to compensate for the storm that many experienced outside. The new generation is growing up with more opportunities, with greater access to education, healthcare, and a more aware community. It is not a perfect reality, but it is more stable than in previous decades. As you have seen, Ukerewe is not just a hidden island. It is an example of how a community can transform itself and offer protection from fear. A space where many people have been able to rebuild their lives. But there is another island where the danger did not come from persecution, but from within. A place where it was not superstitions that almost destroyed life, but human decisions themselves. A paradise that was on the verge of disappearing because of its own mistakes. Rapa Nui, Chile. The island where life almost disappeared. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, more than 3,500 kilometers and 2,200 miles from the nearest continent, lies one of the most isolated inhabited islands on the planet. Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island, now belongs to Chile, but for centuries it was a world apart. A wind-swept volcanic territory surrounded by cliffs and endless waters. A place so remote that it seems suspended in time. And yet, there was a time when it was a true paradise. When the first Polynesian settlers arrived more than 1,000 years ago, they found an island covered with dense forests, rich in birds, with fertile soils and sufficient resources to prosper. For generations, society flourished. They built villages, developed rituals, and created a unique culture. And they began to carve stone giants. The Moai. Huge statues of volcanic stone, some over 10 meters high and weighing dozens of tons, which still today look out over the interior of the island like silent guardians. In those days, each clan competed to build the largest, the tallest, the most impressive. Because those colossi were not simple sculptures. For them, they represented ancestors, spiritual power, and prestige. But moving these massive stones required wood. Lots of wood. And this would be the beginning of the end of their civilization. They needed hundreds or thousands of trees cut down to make rollers, sleds, and ropes. Entire forests were sacrificed to transport and erect increasingly monumental statues. For decades, this religious and social ambition was much more important to them than maintaining the natural balance. Until the trees disappeared. Without trees, there were no more boats for fishing offshore. Without boats, food supplies dwindled. Without forests, the soil began to erode. Without natural protection, crops weakened. And without resources, conflicts began. The isolation that had protected Rapa Nui for centuries became its ultimate prison. The population declined dramatically. Internal strife increased. Even some Moai were toppled. Society entered into crisis. So when the first Europeans arrived in the 18th century, they found a community much smaller and more vulnerable than it had been at its peak. Rapa Nui became one of the most extreme examples of ecological collapse in total isolation. A place where humans, without external enemies, were on the verge of destroying the only world they had. Today, the Moai statues still stand, defying time and wind, reminding us that even in the most remote place on the planet, human decisions have consequences. Rapa Nui is not just a mysterious island, it is a warning. And now I ask you, do you think our civilization could make the same mistake? Or perhaps it is already making it? Think about it for a second. Because when an isolated territory makes bad decisions, the ocean offers no second chances. And yet there is another island where isolation was not a mistake. It was a choice. A territory where no one is allowed to enter. Where contact can mean death. Where the modern world is simply not welcome. North Sentinel, India, the most isolated and dangerous island in the world. In the heart of the Indian Ocean, within the Andaman Archipelago, there is a territory that no one can approach without risking their life. North Sentinel Island. This island, administered by India, is inhabited by the dangerous Sentinelese tribe, one of the most isolated and extreme societies on Earth. They do not seek contact, they do not want visitors, and they have made it clear, generation after generation, that they will protect their territory from any intrusion. That is why anyone who tries to land on their beaches faces an immediate response. It has happened before, and the outcome has always been the same. That is why many consider it the most inaccessible and dangerous place on the planet. North Sentinel is the closest inhabited island to the rest of the Andaman Archipelago, but reaching its shores is virtually impossible. Impossible because this place is protected by Indian law, which prohibits approaching within 5 kilometers of the islet, but above all, because its inhabitants defend their territory with their lives. Today, no boat or drone can fly over or approach without mortal risk. The island is surrounded by guards, and access is strictly controlled to ensure that the modern world does not invade this last, almost untouched human refuge. The reason for this rejection is not capricious, it is memory. During the 20th century, several attempts at contact were made by explorers, anthropologists, and missionaries. At times, there seemed to be gestures of rapprochement, exchanges of objects, signals from a distance. But contact had devastating consequences. Diseases common to us, such as colds or minor infections, proved dangerous and even lethal to a community that had remained isolated for centuries. These diseases, so mild for most people, caused mass deaths among the Sentinelese tribe because, due to their isolation for centuries, they were unprepared to face viruses and bacteria to which their immune systems had never been exposed. Since then, any attempt at rapprochement has been interpreted as a threat. The Sentinelese became hostile, convinced that any contact with strangers brought death, a danger they could not understand but could suffer. This painful memory has been passed down from generation to generation, forming legends that serve to warn them of the dangers of any other human being approaching them. Today, their population is small, and any uncontrolled contact could put them at risk. They live without modern technology, maintaining an ancestral way of life that has survived precisely because of their isolation. A few years ago, a young missionary attempted to reach North Sentinel with the intention of sharing the gospel with them. His arrival had a tragic outcome. The missionary was attacked by the island's inhabitants and lost his life shortly after landing. His body was never recovered. This story leaves us with an important lesson. The Sentinelese do not seek our lifestyle or our technology. They just want to live in peace, in their own way and under their own rules. While the modern world watches from a distance, North Sentinel remains there. Without the internet, without roads, without needing us, perhaps they are not the isolated ones, or perhaps we are the isolated ones from a way of life we no longer understand. We have traveled to some of the most isolated, strange, and extreme islands on the planet. Now the question is for you. Which of these islands would you dare to live on for a while? And which would you not visit even if you were paid? The debate is open. What would you do? We'll read your comments below. Because the future of these islands depends on how we understand isolation. If this journey through the most remote islands on the planet has surprised you, leave a like right now. It's the best way for us to continue exploring realities that the world has almost forgotten. And if you want to continue discovering places where reality surpasses any fiction, here's the next destination. See you there.